Hello. Hi, I hear you. Do you hear
Yay!
me?
Yes,
Hi.
welcome, Desi.
Thank you for having me. So lovely to be with you.
Yes, I was like really, really in love with your content for a while, and I was like, oh my God, I need to have this woman in my platform because it's
Oh,
amazing, and we need to
thank
like
you.
create awareness. Desi,
Thank
where
you,
are you? Are you
darling.
in London?
I'm in London. Yes, I am in London right now. It's snowing. It's been snowing non-stop, so it's very beautiful.
Oh my God. Do you like winter or you prefer
Yes.
summer?
You know what? I don't. I prefer summer. I forgot. I lived in 10 years for California. I've forgotten what winter was like. And now that I'm here, I'm like, yeah, no.
Oh my
So,
God. When did you
yeah.
move?
I moved recently in September.
Oh wow. So you're like
Yeah, just
new then.
recent. New to London. Yeah, completely new.
But what about your
Yeah.
like accent? Your accent is from London, right? I'm
You
like
know what?
not an English speaker, native
My
English, but
accent's
I don't know.
actually a mix of like Australian because I lived in Australia for quite some time. So that's what it's from. Yeah, it's a
Nice.
bit Aussie mixed with so many other things probably along the way. So yeah. And
That's
whereabouts are you
great.
right now?
I am in Jacksonville, Florida, but I'm living like a
Nice.
nomadic life. Because of the pandemic, I decided with me and my husband, we were like, we cannot live in New York City for a long term in a tiny, cramped
Yes.
up in a tiny apartment. You know, it's tough. So,
Absolutely, yeah. Oh, good. And I love your background, so you're in a beautiful place. It's perfect
thank you.
place
It's
for your,
raining today, so I don't know. It's
yeah.
cozy.
It's cozy. Yeah, it's
Yes.
nice.
Daisy, tell us please, a little bit about you for those that don't know you. What do you do? We already know where you are. What do you do?
Yes, well, yes, I am a clinical hypnotherapist, and I work with hypnosis, hypnotherapy. You know, clinical hypnotherapy is defined because it's not a stage hypnosis. You know, it's not what you would see on the stage. It's also not. You know, there's variants of hypnosis that people can work on. I found out there's even, dominatrix and BDSM work with hypnosis. But mine is specifically healing, trauma, working sometimes even side by side with psychologists and kind of, getting referrals from psychologists working on trauma, emotional trauma, inner child trauma, anxiety, depression. And then, of course, there's also, it's a spectrum really that it's funny because I found that in different phases, I receive different clients. There'll be sometimes, quit smoking and weight loss. And then on the other spectrum, there'll be, more with anxiety, especially now with the pandemic. I think everyone's had the time to stay at home and reflect and go deep. So we found that a lot of childhood traumas are coming up, a lot of even limiting beliefs are coming up. So my job is basically to get whatever you want with your conscious mind, whatever it is you want to release or embody, to help you do that, right? In hypnosis, we have a thing called the theory of mind. And if you imagine the mind to be like that iceberg, some people are very familiar with, the top of the iceberg is the tip of the iceberg is our conscious mind, which is this much, 10%. And then the giant chunk underneath that actually drives us is our subconscious mind. And so
Mm-hmm.
the water surface is the barrier. So by the time, from the time we're born to the time we're 8, we're just like sponges, right? We're absorbing beliefs, we're absorbing the world around us. We have no reference. So whatever adults tell us, we take it in, particularly role models. We create associations. Something simple, you get bitten by a dog, negative association to dogs. You have a pet dog, positive associations. There's been trauma in the family, maybe abuse, then positive association to abuse because that means family and love, and therefore you can already kind of see how as you grow up that can stir you in very wrong directions and unfortunately prompt you to attract abusive, for example, relationship partners. Beliefs around money, the same thing. If you saw parents that were very stressed around money, then you develop a limiting belief around money that money means stress. And so all these beliefs live in our subconscious mind, which referring back to the iceberg is that big chunk underneath that drives us. And so whatever we want to change, we think logically, right? With that tiny part of us, we're like, oh, I'd love to shift my belief. And I know that I'm not supposed to, think that way. I know that this is not good for me. I know these habits are destructive for my health, but I can't change them. Well, because there's a barrier between the conscious and subconscious. And we put that barrier on when we're about 8 or 9, so that the ideas don't just drop into our subconscious anymore, that now we have enough reference to think for ourselves. So the idea, anything you want, comes from the conscious, but stops at the barrier. We call this barrier the critical mind. And then it comes to check in with your beliefs right here, right? Your associations. And it's going to see, what does 90% of me believe? And if this 90% contradicts the 10% idea you have here, you're not going to be able to change it, because the idea is going to bounce right here, say no. Whereas in hypnosis, we open that barrier. So anything you want with your conscious mind, we simply just drop into your subconscious, and we begin to reprogram. We add new beliefs, we replace the old ones, or we will turn negative associations to positives and positives to negatives.
That is amazing. What a great explanation. And I feel that like during the pandemic, a lot of people had to stay at home, including myself. And I experienced this myself when we're sitting down with our emotions and our thoughts. And we start seeing from different perspectives, like what kind of decisions we're taking, why are we taking these decisions? And it is very challenging at times to be the judge of your own actions and your own feelings, because you're immersed in that. So I think that always working with someone like you, like yourself, or like a psychologist, it's such a great and powerful tool to have. Although like a lot of people put like this negative kind of like emotion around it, right? Like, oh, I need help. I'm something is wrong with me. But at the end of the day, I am a true believer, like, we as humans always have to continue growing and continue learning of our own mind, because I feel the mind is such a insane, such a deep thing, right? To live with, and nobody's ever masters the mind in one life, I feel.
No, yeah, of course.
Super complex.
Exactly. There's always so much to work on, and different, beliefs are going to emerge in different phases of your life. And you'll realize, oh, this is what I need to work on. And, there's no rush. It's one step at a time. And usually when you start to work on yourself with hypnosis or whatever other tool, you'll notice it's like peeling an onion, right? Because it's layer after layer, and you realize, ooh, this is connected to that. And also something interesting happens when we go in the subconscious mind, whatever, once we start to dig in, a lot of things start to come up, right? Because now we open the doors. And now you'll notice that after session 1, we always give a week between sessions, and you'll notice that throughout the week, things begin to shift and change, and then more things start to come up that, you can work on with yourself or with help. Sometimes, depending where you're at, I'm more than happy to, just let clients do their own work, and then come back at some point to just, kind of do one more session. It doesn't have to be consecutively all the time, So it's just getting those helps. It's like a facilitator, It doesn't mean that your therapist is somebody that knows everything and has figured everything out, but they have an objective view and know the tools to help you look deep, because really all hypnosis is self-hypnosis. First of all, we hypnotize our own selves. If you don't want to be hypnotized, I can't hypnotize you. It's just when we see people being hypnotized on stage, it's because they want to be there. A trained hypnotist knows how to pick the people that are excited. And we divide that into suggestibility. Suggestibility is how we understand how people receive information, right? There's people that are very directly suggestible, which means they usually had a primary caregiver that spoke to them very directly. They always meant what they said. The child didn't have to read between the lines. And so these kind of people absorb information directly. So if you tell them something, they'll understand it and immediately absorb a command. There's some people that are more, we call them emotionally suggestible, which is also, they work by inferences. So they always read between the lines because they had a primary caregiver that was very mysterious at times, more enigmatic. Maybe they weren't so in touch with their emotions. They didn't always mean what they said. So these people become very analytical. And back in the day, they even used to be thought that they're unhypnotizable. Because they don't take direct suggestions. They question you. Their subconscious is used to always over-analyzing. And so that would be someone that is most likely not going to be keen to be on stage, right? They're thinking too much, they're analyzing. Whereas the people that are more directly suggestible, and especially those that are in between, that are kind of direct and indirect, they're even more likely to be hypnotized. So the hypnotist knows by asking a few questions, they already know who is easily hypnotizable, who is really willing, and they pick those people up. So all hypnosis is always self-hypnosis. And you can't change anything unless you really want to change. So that is also my job to say, what do you want to change? If you don't know, we dig into the subconscious and we ask the subconscious mind what needs to change. And you'll be surprised how everybody has their answers. You just need to ask the right questions. A therapist does not have your answers. They're just a guide to ask you the right questions.
I love that. Wow. Now I'm like, I want to have a session with you.
You're welcome.
Yay! So I invited you because, first of all, your content, as I said, drew me in. Like, it's very beautiful, very spiritual, very like you. With you, I feel that I'm in a space where I can heal from a lot of perspectives in my life, like from the soul, from the mind, and I love that because I'm a very holistic person, and also because I, if you didn't know much about Fercci is a community for women who are trying to live a more balanced life, to change habits. We deal a lot with hormonal imbalances and a lot of conditions like PCOS, endometriosis, which are very tied to chronic pain and like very hard to manage, right? So, but I've been reading a lot of research because that's another thing, like in my platform, it's always about the expert, always about the medical back science, like I'm not about like blah, blah, like just and I've seen a lot of these conditions, for example, specifically the endometriosis, that a lot of women report kind of like having these symptoms after realizing they have like a very deep trauma, or maybe they had already like a big trauma in the childhood years, and those kind of emotions where I don't want to say the direct cause, but like influence the way they feel today and their diagnosis. So from your perspective, do you think our emotions have power over the symptoms we can feel in our bodies? We're not talking about our minds, the symptoms or the chronic illnesses that we can develop.
Absolutely. I'm 100% believer that everything starts in the emotional body. Everything is feelings that are unexpressed, feelings that we didn't let go through, fears, nowadays, even epigenetics. We're inheriting trauma from our parents. Just like, we inherit disease and illnesses from parents. Physically, it's actually also inherited emotionally, and they can surface. Some people are more fragile and more suggestible, vulnerable to these kind of emotional triggers, right? So not everybody will be triggered by the same thing. That's why a person is not only a product of their environment, but also of what they inherited, right? So say if you're a child if your parents were children of war, and they went through famine and terrible, trauma, and they saw a lot of people die around them, then of course this trauma gets locked in and then gets transferred onto their child, and that will be expressed eventually somehow, or the child at least will become a lot more sensitive to certain emotional triggers. And that's been already experimented on mice. A simple experiment done when the mother was traumatized, and then the little baby mouse was exposed to the same triggers and reacted with the same fear without ever being exposed to those conditions and triggers. It was from the mother, passed on to the child. So absolutely, we inherit those. Sometimes through life, we absorb those, as things are happening. And yes, when we don't attend to our emotional state, it is such a common thing for us to lock in feelings and not express them, or to feel like we're too weak, or I'm not going to cry, or, the expression was like, say you go through a breakup, say, they're not worth your tears. It's crying is almost seen like something that you're doing for somebody else, but crying is just another physical response, just like, urinating, is this something needs to be released. It's very natural. And so if we gave ourselves the time to feel, and really connect and figure out, what is my body trying to tell me? Where is this coming from? What do you want to tell me? Sit with the body. I even do in hypnosis, when people come with some sort of illness, especially chronic pain, I do an imagery work when you can manifest the pain and see it face to face in whatever shape or form the pain appears to you. It can be an old man, it can be a blob, it can be an animal, and then speak to the pain, because it's just your subconscious giving you a symbol of what that is. You know, and working with that and saying, what do you need? What do you need me to do? And people immediately discover where it started. Some people are so comfortable with that chronic pain because it's been with them for so many years. It has helped them achieve so many things. There's also a thing called secondary gain sometimes, that, you know, even pain and dis-ease that comes into our body is sometimes created to help us with something else.
Wow.
And it's fascinating to see what people come up with when they're in hypnosis, to say, I needed this, I needed this IBS to teach me how to eat right. And I'm so afraid of letting it go. And the person has to realize, okay, I'm strong enough and equipped enough now. I know exactly how to deal with my nutrition. I no longer need IBS. I can now release it. And you'll be surprised that in just over 5 sessions, gone. You know, it's like symptoms alleviated, because they release it. And so if you release it, the body is so much connected to our brains. It's whatever the brain starts to think and believe, it begins immediately to send signals and chemicals. So our chemistry shifts. And so of course our hormones shift, everything shifts. It responds to your thoughts, right? If you're afraid, what happens? Adrenaline, whoop, all these other neurotransmitters, hormones coming out, you know, preparing you to fight. Right? That's your very most primal. I'm giving an example of fear because it's the most primitive primal instinct. Body chemistry change. It changed from a thought. Of course, everything changes from a thought and an emotion. The body changes. And of course, thoughts and emotions immediately shift your body chemistry. And as a result, start to play with your cells and create disease.
No, this is very good. And it's, like I always talk about emotional disclosure whenever I can, because it's such a powerful thing to do, even if it's anger or fear or sadness from the actual moment. I feel that when you start being more aware of like the things that you're feeling, even in the right now, we're not having to talk about past traumas in the childhood or whatever. Even if right now I'm feeling angry with my partner or with my friend, and I try to kind of like work on that, I feel that we start escalating that kind of like pyramid of discovering our own emotions, and then that's our training to go towards our more deep concerns or traumas or all of these things. So I think awareness and emotional disclosures, in your opinion, would they be like one 100%. Of the first steps?
One of the first steps, absolutely. First step to sit back with your feelings and recognize, or maybe let them go through you first. And I always say, once you let the feelings go through you, you will have a much clearer idea about what's going on. If you suppress them, forget about it. They'll start to try come out left, right, and center from all ways until maybe they do turn to physical discomfort and some sort of dis-ease, So absolutely become aware, start to journal. I really always encourage journaling. Whatever is happening with you, journal. When you said even with cycles, you work with that. I also have my own journal. I take note of every single day of my cycle, how you feel during your follicular phase, your ovulation phase, notice what's coming up for you. Notice what emotions are coming as you take note of your cycle day by day. And you'll notice that when you stay true to your cycle, your pain starts to alleviate too, right? When you honor yourself, when you give energy to yourself in the moments of the month that you need it the most, boom, no pain.
Yeah.
Because the body doesn't need to alert you about anything anymore.
Yeah, no, and this is something actually I focus on with my clients, because it's like when for example, the other day I was on my menstrual phase, and usually during our menstrual phase, like the chemical combinations of our brain are more like into intuition, into self-introspective, into like paying attention of like what went wrong, right? Because we're not pregnant. Like that's our natural response. Like your body's like, what are you doing? Why are you get pregnant? So transferring that when we become aware of that, right? Transferring into something useful instead of like taking it into like, I'm a failure, nothing is working on in my life. Instead of that, I grabbed it and I'm like, okay, something went wrong here with my personal life. What am I going to do to change it? Like that, using those emotions that are naturally, chemically configured in our brain and in our bodies instead
Yeah.
of like working against them is such a powerful thing. Such a
Yes,
powerful thing.
absolutely. Yeah, and they say even to break it in neuroscience, the basics of very basics, everything, all these responses are actually living in our limbic brain, right? And now we have a very developed prefrontal cortex as we evolve, which it takes about, at least 20 seconds to connect to your prefrontal. So if you do spend some time to whatever reaction happened here with your primitive mind, which is there to defend you. Like you said, there's exactly those instincts of like, why are you not pregnant? What do I need to do to defend you? It's going to start to put its defenses on because it's just biologically, unfortunately, we have not evolved past that primitive limbic brain. And so if you give it some time and some self-reflection and you say awareness, the limbic will start to send messages to your prefrontal cortex, and here your intelligent prefrontal evolved brain is going to start connecting the dots in a more mature way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we have a lot of questions. I see
Questions?
them, but let's like finish the questions that we have
Sure.
prepared for all of you guys and girls, and we're gonna then answer the questions.
Yeah.
So one of the things that we have with hypnotherapy for somebody that is new to this world, for somebody that never heard of it, or maybe saw it in cartoons when they were children, because
Yeah.
that's honestly like in the movies, with the clock, like that's the usual thing that you learn. So in few words, what is hypnotherapy and what could we expect from a hypnotherapy session?
Well, so the clock is not it's not wrong because it's an overload, and it works very well on children. That's how you can hypnotize them, because the repetitive motion is an overload of message units. We receive message units on the daily with all our senses, right? Smell, message units. Eyes, you're looking at, vision is all message units. Hearing, message units. Touch, you're receiving messages and sending messages to the brain. And hypnosis really works by overloading the critical brain, the critical mind, not brain, mind in us, so that it can open. So they can basically go, I can't deal with this anymore. And it opens, and everything from the conscious goes into the subconscious, right? This is how we open your critical mind. So that's why there's things called an induction. There are different types of inductions. They're very simple. There's nothing too complicated, but they're simple inductions that we can do physically, with asking you to move certain parts of your body, to, counting and giving you some mental activities to do. It's just to overload your critical mind so it can shut off and you can go into a deep state. So before we even do a relaxation for you to relax from head to toe, we're going to induce you by shutting off that critical mind, putting it to sleep. So in hypnosis, you're completely still aware, you're conscious, but you're also working with the subconscious now. You're able to drop right in. If you're in hypnosis, you're not deeply asleep or completely gone. If I was to say, hey, there's a fire, we must go, you immediately jump up and run. Your self-preservation instincts are completely working at all times. It's a state that we're all very familiar with. At the end of a long work day, when all your senses are overloaded and you kind of zonk out in front of the computer or TV, you're in hypnosis. There's no critical mind there, You're just... if you're watching your favorite movie and you start to feel and laugh with them and cry with them, you're in hypnosis. Because if your critical mind was up, it'd say, why are you laughing? It's actors in a black box, right?
Right.
So when you're watching a movie, you're completely hypnotized, and you notice somebody's calling your name, and that they'll be like, hello, hello, and you can hear them. You're consciously aware of them, but you choose not to focus on them. You choose to focus on the movie because this is what's got your attention. It's the exact same thing with hypnosis. You're aware of the outside world, but you choose to focus into this. So 100% of your attention is on whatever you're working on, versus the times when you're not in hypnosis, and when you start thinking about the changes that you want to make, but you're unable to drop them down, right? They just stay here on the surface. So that's why in hypnosis, everything just drops right down, because you're completely just open and focused on that one thing. Your whole being is only focused on changing one thing at a time. So whatever the hypnotist tells you, you're shifting and changing that.
Wow, that's cool. Like I cannot wait to try it. And then how will hypnotherapy, for example, help in the basic level, right? You don't have to go into too deep. explaining this, but how can hypnotism help somebody with chronic pain, or for example, someone rewiring some of the patterns that they had, like unhealthy patterns, into a more healthy habits?
So when you first come into the session, right now everything's over Zoom, but say, you know, we spent the first 20 minutes or so discussing your issue, right? Whatever the presenting issue is, whatever you work on. And so, you know, the client will tell me what they want to work on, and I'll ask them what do they want to implement into the subconscious, what do they want to shift, and I will write everything down in the client's own words, because when I'm feeding it into the subconscious will understand me best using their own words, right? And oftentimes clients really give you beautiful images. They tell you exactly, they'll say, oh, I've been feeling like I'm locked in a box. So that is something I'm going to use now. I'm going to put you in your fantasy locked in a box, and we're going to work with that, because images, I worked a lot with images, because images is how we communicate to begin with. Like the first thing we do is we see an image in our mind, a feeling comes up as a result, and then we take action, right? That's how we function as human beings. So imagery is very important, and our mind doesn't know the difference between fantasy and reality. So when we're feeding a fantasy in the hypnotic state, the body, like I said to you, starts to release the chemicals, thinking that it's actually going through that. You know, if you're in deep hypnotic state and I'm leading you through a forest, your body is believing, oh, I'm in a forest, because, you know, in hypnosis, we use all the senses. I get you to hear it, smell it, feel it, touch it. And so all your senses are experiencing themselves as if they're in a forest. So whatever we're creating, this fantasy that we're creating this in your imagination, it starts to, so sweet. It starts to release all these barriers that we have around the old beliefs, and starts to adopt these new images that I just gave you. And so suddenly these new images become comfortable, right? They become something you know. It's part of your known. And you begin to accept it as something that is, oh, it's normal. So I'm pain-free now. This is what it looks like. You know, let's imagine, what does it look like? First of all, I always like to ask the body first, why are you in pain and what is happening? I don't want to just release pain without asking what it's there for. Because if it has a purpose and a defense, you can't take it out. You know, there's a defense for a reason. So you've got to ask why it's there, so we can find a healthy way of replacing it. And then once we know what we're working with, then we're going to start to lower the pain. And again, you give it the right imagery. You know, it can be, you imagine that there's a dial, and if your pain is a 10 right now, dial it down to a 0. You know, and you give the body the instruction, it will do it. You know, pain is not there permanently. Pain is only there to tell us something is wrong. When you tune in and when you start to feel your body, and when you ask what's going on and the body answers you, and now you have a communication going, boom, you can dial the pain down. You can say, thank you, pain. We're good. I understand what you mean. We're good. But until you realize what the defense is, you're not going to be able to dial it down. And it wouldn't be healthy, because you might be ignoring something big.
I love that. I think that it is very, your practice or your practice is very tied to kind of like a meditative state, right?
Yes, absolutely. It's very much like that. You're in a theta brainwave, just like you would be in deep meditation. The only difference is that in certain meditations, sometimes not everyone can go past the critical mind. So I have found that in order to really go past the critical mind, you do have to have a hypnotic induction, a very specific to that person, because I'm going to see, how does my client receive information? Remember I talked to you earlier about suggestibility? It's very important for me to know, how do you receive information, so I know exactly how to induce you, so I can get past your critical mind, so I can open the gateways. Because if I don't, I'm not going to be able to open them, and we'll be in a nice relaxing state, but critical mind's still here. It's still kind of blocking the communication, and it's not as clear, and it's not as powerful, impactful.
Yeah, and I feel that like having the help of the hypnotherapist can really, shut down your ego, or shut down that self-judgment that you might have for certain emotions, or having the danger of like tapping into that trauma or that emotion or that pain, and then being afraid of it, because as humans, we always, at the end of the day, our primal thing is to survive. And at the end of the day, that emotion, that trauma, that pain, or whatever symptom that we have there, is there for a reason, because we weren't able to deal with it. So working with like a person like Desi, for those listening, it is such an amazing thing where you can unlock real healing.
Yes. Yeah. And it's important to have someone to guide you, because you, like you said, if you're in hypnosis and something, frightens you, then I will be able to navigate you and move past it, and I will see if this is something we tackle right now, or this is something we might want to pull back on, depending on what the reaction is,
Okay. Yeah, keep going. Sorry.
No, that's it. Yeah, it's just
Okay.
it's a gentle way. Hypnosis is very gentle, and actually the changes are very subtle. It's not like you awake and you're like, oh, well, a lot of stuff happened, and then your response to the world begins to change. By day 4 after a hypnosis session, you'll notice that your response to everything in the world and your triggers is going to shift.
Wow, that is amazing. Okay, so I know we have a few more minutes. I'm sorry we're going over the time that we
That's okay.
agree. Okay, so let's go with a few questions that the community has. Ritual Common, it says, does your work suggest that people carry past life trauma within them as well?
In clinical hypnotherapy, that is not something you really study. I have studied past life regression, and I do that. I personally do believe that. I do like to see it. When I do past life regression, I like to believe that we have lived many lives and somehow they are manifesting themselves. But you can even choose to believe that, when you do a past life regression, you might even choose to believe that this is just your subconscious giving you symbolistic meaning of what is going on inside you, for you to see it from a completely different angle. It can be, maybe you see yourself in 16th century France, being a maid in a castle, and maybe that really happened. Or maybe you want to choose to see it as, okay, what is my association to a maid in a 16th century France, because maybe that is what my subconscious is giving me to help me resolve this problem. But I do, I also have a spiritual approach on things. So I do have, somewhere in my awareness, I do carry that belief that we do have indeed past lives, and that is completely, I don't exclude it. Let's just say that I don't exclude it. And who's to say what's real, right? Who's to say? We don't even know what imagination really is.
That is 100% true. I actually, I'm with you on that, but I'm like more into like different dimensions instead of like past lives.
I love that too. I don't exclude that either. I absolutely love that. Different dimensions. I adore that. Yes, it could be. Yeah.
Okay, let's keep going. Okay, Gabe or Mate has a great take on this in when the body says no. I guess that's a book.
Yeah, wonderful. Thank you for sharing that.
Yes. Okay, Foxy Corona, what can we do ourselves to deal with and get rid of childhood trauma? This is a heavy one.
Yeah, that's not something that, we can answer. It's just so subjective. So it really depends on what is going on. But a lot of inner child work is great. So with childhood trauma, I like to bring out the inner child, which is the psyche of the child inside. As we grow up, there's parts of us that got traumatized in different phases of our lives that, if not looked upon, they just remain there, just like they are. It's like they got conserved in time. They're frozen in time right there. And so until we go back, and I'm not talking about a regression, like going back, it's more like until we call upon that part of ourselves, that psyche, and speak to it and ask, what is it that you want? What's going on? How did you feel in that trauma? And really listen, because oftentimes what happened, the child was not listened to. Children really want to be seen, and children want to be heard. I find that specifically little children always want to be seen, and teenagers want to be heard, because that's the time when we start to develop more and more our conscious analytical mind, and we want to have ideas, but adults don't take us seriously, right? So oftentimes if you find there's a childhood trauma in teenage years, you really want to listen to that teenager, let them vent. When you bring that child up, you can do Gestalt therapy, which is put them in a chair in front of you if you don't want to do hypnosis. Imagine that they're sitting in front of you in a chair, and speak to your young self and say, what do you need from me? What's going on? And they can be angry. They can say, I'm so angry. This happened. And you really listen and validate their feelings. Because what happened is, at that age, their feelings were not validated. They were not heard. They were not seen. Feelings were not validated, or being tossed aside as, it's not important. And so the child didn't have time to express, didn't have the opportunity to express itself. And so it's very important to address that psyche and say, I'm here for you now. My adult psyche is now a separate being. I've learned so much, and I tell you that you're safe here with me, right? And yes, you're completely right to have all these feelings. I validate you, and I love you. So that is something,
Yeah.
and that's, and with children as well. And oftentimes you can even ask the child, what do you want to do? And you can even ask, what do you want me to do in my waking life to satisfy you? And you'll often
Right.
find that, the little girl inside you maybe still wants to go out and run or paint or, watch cartoons, or maybe she wants to do cartwheels and dance more. And this is a very alive, real part of yourself that you should absolutely listen to. So I always encourage that if you talk to that little child, whatever she tells you or he tells you, do it immediately. Do them in your adult life, so that, and you'll find that it brings liberation. It really frees you when you listen to any part of yourself that is locked in, that is constricted. When you do what it asks you to do,
Oh, you unlock something else. It is
yes.
100%. And I feel that a lot of the stress, a lot of the anxiety is coming from a place where you don't pay attention to your own needs, especially your creativity, your sense of playfulness, all of these things. Although we're adults, we need to still connect with these emotions because it's part of of ourselves and our minds, and that is something that we will never get rid of. And I feel that that
Yes.
is what the beauty of life, like enjoying.
Yes.
And then like coming back to the also like we can add to what we mentioned a little bit before. If you feel that you have to work on those childhood traumas, like come back, kind of like don't, if it's too complicated to go and speak to the child, try to see what's happening now. Just starting with little things, baby steps, being aware of
Definitely.
your emotions, being aware of what's happening, how you feel, and where this emotion comes from. Like, for example, I have a lot of childhood traumas, unfortunately, like everybody, but
Yeah,
I
of
had to
course.
deal a lot with like rape and eating disorders because of this, and all of these things that I had to like work on myself. And my way, personal way, I unfortunately didn't have the chance to connect with the psychologist or like a clinical hypnotherapist like yourself. But what I did was that like I chose to just take it in bite size. Like, okay, I'm feeling angry. Where is this anger coming from? And then like I started like going like that slowly until I reached the point where I'm like, wow, today I realized that I'm angry right now because of X thing that happened years ago.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And you'll find that you'll recreate those patterns. You'll understand that it can be something very simple. It can be, I'll give you an example of something I've worked with people is, say you and your partner are constantly having a fight about simple things like who's going to do the dishes or who's going to clean. And then as you start to slowly trace it back, like, why is this making me so angry? Why are we fighting about this? Why am I angry? Is this really about the dishes? And then as you maybe go back, you start to trace it back to when you were a child, there was a fear of being abandoned. And unless you did the chores, mom was angry or dad was angry. And there was a fear as a child, the kids are very sensitive. So any sort of rejection might cause them to believe that they're being abandoned, especially if there was a case of divorce, if the parents are constantly separating. The child can associate misdemeanor of the smallest kind to abandonment. And so then they can grow being perfectionists and trying to constantly, impress, especially the ones that they're most closest to, because otherwise they'll get abandoned, you know. That it's just one example. So suddenly the dishes becomes all about, oh, wow. So, maybe my father divorced my mother, and I figure as a child, they don't know the connection. Children have an ego that they think it's always them. So they don't have, especially at the tender age between, 1 and 7, they just always believe it's them. So the child might think it's my fault. And therefore, if I'm not perfect, if I don't put too much effort, even in just doing the dishes or tidying up my room, I'm going to get abandoned.
Mm-hmm.
And the fear of abandonment triggers a massive defense. And the defense, anger. And then argument, fight.
Yeah, it's really humbling to realize that correlation, that picture that you gave us at the beginning with the tip of the iceberg, and then the unconscious mind being at the bottom, and we not knowing anything about it. And like we need to realize there is so many things happening in here, and it could impact so deeply the things we do, the emotions we feel, the thoughts that come through, and even like our physical symptoms, like you explained. So thank you very much.
Yeah,
Tell
my
us
pleasure.
how we can work with you. I think we're done with questions.
Yeah, I was
Um,
seeing if there, no, yeah.
yeah. Oh, we have like a comment. It's more than a comment than a question, but maybe you can teach in about it's hard to do so many things you want to accomplish when you have children. It is
Of
true.
course, yeah, I can
It is
imagine.
true.
Yeah, of
But it's
course. But
always, like finding time, right? Like, what do you think?
yeah, absolutely. I believe that, yeah, it's always finding time for yourself. Even my clients that are mothers, I always encourage them to always give yourself that time. Find that hour for yourself. Don't ever put yourself last, Give yourself, because when you're full, you have so much more to give. We all know, we've all probably experienced stressed parents. Nobody wants to be around stressed parents. Nobody wants to be around angry, resentful parents. So always do, it's not selfish. It's actually for the children. Remember that. It is not selfish to take time for yourself, because they will thank you for it. Children are mostly susceptible to energy. And if the energy is no good, you can say the kindest of words. They're very good little detectives. They're detectives. They'll know exactly what's going on.
Yeah, and we are huge sponges, as we like this entire conversation. We talk about trauma and our
Yeah,
past and our
yeah,
childhood. So taking that time for yourself, like evolving every day a little bit more. Don't get overwhelmed. Maybe 10, 15, 20 minutes a day that you can take
exactly,
for yourself.
exactly.
That's
Starting
gonna have
small.
a direct impact on your child.
Yes, yeah,
So
tiny, tiny bits and pieces. Absolutely, starting small, because oftentimes when we say I don't have time, it's called resistance. You have time. You can always make time. You really can make time. Even like you said, 5 minutes. Honor yourself. Be gentle to yourself. Love yourself. Be kind to yourself. Give yourself 5 minutes. Just 5 minutes. Say I deserve these 5 minutes.
yeah.
Don't put yourself last. Yeah.
100%. Okay, Desi, thank you so very much. Tell us how we
My
can work
pleasure.
with you. You are doing telemedicine right now. Yeah, telemedicine. I don't know how to call it, like Zoom.
I'm doing Zoom, yes. So I'm doing online. I call it online hypnosis. Yeah, so it's Zoom. So if you want, you can go onto my website, hypnosis-symbiosis.com, or you can just pop onto my Instagram and then email me through there. You can even DM me. I usually see my messages within a day or two, so I will see it. I will respond to you. If we need further correspondence, we can, take it to an email. I offer 15 minutes. I always offer 15 minutes of free consultation. So if someone is interested, they can tell me a little bit more about themselves. I can see how I can help them, and then we can plan how to proceed with sessions from the consultation. So
Awesome.
yes,
Awesome. Thank you very much. I'll add
my
that to the
pleasure. Thank
description.
you. Thank you
And it
so
was a
much for
pleasure.
having
I really
me.
hope to have you again.
Yes, it really was. It would be my absolute pleasure. Absolutely. Thank you so much. And thank you everyone who tuned in. I hope you learned something. And, if you have any more questions, then reach out.
Yes, yes, please. Thank you,
All right.
Desi. I'll talk
Thank
to you
you.
soon.
Talk to you soon. Bye.
Bye, everyone.